Hi guys, Bomber here. Welcome back to the channel, and today we are gonna do a CCC. This week's CCC was the last one. You needed to design basically a card from a tab which only required one more card to be completed, and so those tabs were War from Vespitole, Slaves from Daramek, and Espionage from Metris. And instead, this new CCC week will be themed around the hero cards. You basically need to design a card, a hero card rarity, from the heroes we already have in the game. You can pick whatever you like and make an alternative hero card for them. I'll leave down below in the description the link to the Discord server where you can leave your submission. And so that's it, and let's jump into the reviews. So, at 6th and last place, we have Goat Herder from Podo Problems. It's a slave from Daramek. It costs 6 gold, has 3 health points, and it reads, Herd of Goats generate +1 additional resource, does not stack with other goat herders, and also 55% chance to generate 1 random resource. Also, he did write a flavor text, which is, the fields are as much his home as theirs. So definitely a pretty interesting flavor text, but other than that, I gave this card 1 point out of 5 in design and 1 point out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 3 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because God Herder is a too specific synergy card. The best comparison probably is Shepherd. Also, in that same regard, it's really similar to Shepherd, but it's only less interesting than the Shepherd, because the Shepherd also has this theme of doubling your resources from your herds, actually, so a much wider synergy, which is actually a bit safer and also more healthy for the game. There should be synergies, but not too many specific synergies like this one. This one is only for 1 card in specific. Instead, the Shepherd is for a bunch of cards, and actually a tab, probably. And also the Shepherd does stack, instead this does not. And also the Shepherd has this intercept theme, which the Goat Herder does not, and only has 1 more health in comparison to the Shepherd. And also there is that RNG effect that I really didn't get, because why not making it like a full percent, like a sure event, like for example generate 1 random resource, it will be fine. Probably you want to make a random effect if you think that the card is too strong, if that effect triggers all the times, but really I prefer to balance things out. That's the only reason why you could think from a design perspective to actually add a random effect, is just for balance. But I don't think that this card needs balancing in this way, first of all. And also I prefer to balance things out by increasing other stuffs or decreasing some other stuffs. Like for example, if you were going to design this card and wasn't sure that if it has a full proc percent for this effect, it was too strong, and so you thought, well, I could make it random, and so that's balanced. It's better, in my opinion, to actually make the card weaker, like for example increase its cost by 1 or decreasing 1 of his health or whatever, and actually make the effect trigger all the time, instead of keeping all the rest the same and making that effect that you think is troublesome make it random, in my opinion. And so for that reason I gave it 1 point out of 5 in design, as I said, 2 RNG and a 2 specific synergy. Instead, for balance I also gave 1 star, 1 point out of 5, because the card is too slow, and if you compare it to the Shepherd, for example, you really get so much less value compared to the Shepherd. For just 1 more gold, the Shepherd actually intercepts some of the attacks, so that you can actually shield the other herds, instead of having 1 more health points like the Goat Herder does. But really, if you just have the Goat Herder out and your opponent just kills your herds, this Goat Herder is doing nothing. Instead, the Shepherd needs to be answered a bit. At least you need to surpass those 2 intercepts to actually kill the other goats. So the Shepherd is actually shielding them. Also, the Shepherds can stack, And the only probable thing that this card has better than the Shepherd is that the shepherd himself does not do anything if not for the intercept, but really you don't care about defending if you are not attacking at least a bit. And instead this god herder has the chance to generate some resources, but really if you play this card only for that reason, compared to the god herd of gods themselves, you are paying 4 more gold for just 1 more health points and half the chance to generate the resources compared to the herd of gods. So really there is no point in that effect being your reason why you play this card over the shepherd. And so for that reason this is a really weak card, just a power creep compared in the negative sense compared to the shepherd, and so that's the reason why I gave it 1 point. Then in the 5th place we actually have a tie, and the first card of the 5th place is Cruel Whip from Superman. And it's another time a slave card from Daramek, obviously. It costs 4 gold, and it reads attack 3 times your side. If it kills a slave, the slave activates 3 times. So I actually think that this effect stacks, probably. So if, for example, you have only 3 health allies, and they are all slaves, and if this kills all 3 of them, they all activate 3 times. So if that's the real way this card works, I gave it 2 points out of 5 in design and 2 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 6 points out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is another time because for the design the mechanic is too specific. Because some comparison are, for example, the Scrivener, which is also in the same faction. And the Scrivener, yes, you may argue that also it's pretty specific, because it actually only does something for some types of cards, or even the Shepherd from before. It only does something for a tab, at least. And yes, that's true. And also this card, in the same regard, is different than the one before, because it actually isn't too synergistic only to a specific kind of card, but it's actually a tab, so it's a pretty healthy synergy, in my opinion. But the problem here is that if you look at the Shepherd or the Scrivener, for example, the Scrivener has a synergy, but if that synergy does not activate or whatever, because you don't have the combo needed, the Scrivener does not have a negative effect. It's just a neutral effect, and probably also positive, because yes, it's very little, but you are getting a 1 health points body on the board. So really, the fact is that the card has synergy potential, but if it does not have that synergy, it does not hurt you or whatever. It just is pretty much neutral. And the problem instead with this card is if you do not run slaves or you do not have slaves in the board, this card is only a negative for you. You don't want to eat yourself, obviously. And so for that reason, since this card can't work by itself, like for example the Shepherd, you want it to be, obviously you want it to synergize with your other heirs, but even if you don't have heirs, the card is actually fine by itself. It's actually shielding for 2 every turn. And so that's a neutral slash positive effect. Instead, this card is only positive if you have the slaves, so the synergy needed, and it's only negative if you don't have it. It's not neutral or positive, like some other cards. And so that's the problem in design, in my opinion. For balance aspect, instead, I think that this card is probably too OP, because there are some healthy potentials, like for example playing a bunch of orphan gangs, and so that could be probably an orphan gang aggro type. For example, if you have 3 orphan gangs, and you could do that by turn 2, you are already eating your opponent for 1, probably, in the first turn, and then 3 in the second turn, so that's already 4. And then the next turn, they attack, so that's 7, and then you play Cruel Whip, and so that's, you kill the slaves, and they activate 3 times, so that's 3 times 3, which is 3 attacks times 3 slaves that you have, the orphan gangs, and so that's 9 attack, and so you can see that already by turn 4, or 3 actually, by turn 3 you are eating your opponent for 16, which is pretty much a huge deal. Yes, your opponent can obviously answer that, so it's still safe. I could say that if that was the only thing, the card was probably still okay, because your opponent can answer with that. Probably it will be too aggressive in the long run, but your opponent could have the tools to deal with it. But the real problem is here is the rat catchers and the scriveners. because really, and in particular the Scriveners, there have been times in the past when you could sack the Scrivener, and that would lead to infinite combos. I don't see that infinite potential still here, because actually the fact that with that infinite combo was the fact that you add rights that could sack your Scrivener, so then your Scrivener will be put back into your deck, but probably you had another right or another Scrivener, probably another right, that did redraw you the Scrivener, so you replay the Scrivener, and it redraws the right that sacrificed the Scrivener, and so on. So that was the infinite potential, which is not here, because the Cruel Whip isn't a right card by itself, so that's safe. But really, if you just have one Scrivener into play, then you play Cruel Whip, and if you add by any chance 3 rights into your deck, for example 3 Rite of Combats, you're just casually drawing 3 Rite of Combats out of your deck like that, or anything like Rite of Brood or whatever. And probably also combined with other possible Scriveners or Red Catchers that did redraw other Scriveners. So really, pretty threatening, and for that reason I gave it 2 points out of 5 in balance. Then, for the second card at the 6th place, we have Midwife from Pod of Problems, and it's a slave. It costs 5 gold and has 1 health points. And it reads on turn feed/play, so all of them, or all of them, restore 1 health points for all allies. So I gave it this card 2 points out of 5 in design and 2 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 6 points out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because for the design aspect, it is not so flavorful for Daramek in particular. Because really, Daramek wants to sacrifice stuff and sacrifice his own thing, attack itself, and some cruel stuff like this. And healing is not that flavorful in Daramek, in my opinion. And instead, for the balance, I also gave it 2 points out of 5, because first of all, the card is really weak. It probably costs too much for what it does. And also, it's probably also a design problem in here, because this is a wide effect. A wide effect is the definition of an effect which is better if you have a wide board. Because obviously, if you only have this card into the play, you are getting 1 proc of this effect. If you have 2, that's 2 proc of the effect. If you have 3, you got 3 proc, and so on. So this effect obviously becomes better the more allies you have in play, and that's obvious. But the problem with going wide is that more often than not, those allies which make you go wide are probably weak. They have a low amount of health by definition. Swarmy decks usually have weak creatures or allies or whatever. And so, for example, if you go wide, for example, with Orphan Gangs or Herd of Rats, that's it, or Gold Panners, whatever, really. Those you may go wide with those cards, but then this effect is useless, because 1 health allies can't heal, and so this effect is really useless. So obviously you want to use this effect in allies that can actually heal, and probably more than once per turn. And so we are looking at, for example, Overseers, or probably the Colossal Laurox, or the other heirs with more than 1 health. But the problem here is that still your opponent, if possible, will usually just kill the creature or the ally or whatever if he can, and if not, he will not attack it at all. So, for example, if your opponent produces 1 skull per turn and it attacks a 5 health ally every turn, obviously this card is strong because he can heal every time the skull that is dealing damage to your ally. And so it denies that. But obviously, if your opponent is a bit intelligent, he will not attack for 5 turns and then kill the creature with 5 health, so denying the healing effect. The only reason why this card could synergize in some ways, obviously, is with interceptors. But Daramek is really famous for not having really good interceptors. So really, the only synergy that I see here would be with God of Rider, which is also pretty synergistic with this card in particular, because the God Outrider, you can't kill him for sure. And that's another problem of RNG, but I'll skip on that. You are not sure to kill the God Outrider. So, for example, you have 3 skulls, and you think that's enough to kill the God Outrider. You attack, but it actually dodges 2 times instead of your expected 1, for example, and so it stays at 1 health, and so the midwife can actually heal back the God Outrider. So, but that's the only synergy that there is in all the other cards of Daramek, and you can't base a card only for 1 synergy, and it's even that strong at all. And so that's the reason why I gave it 2 points in design and 2 points in balance. So, for the 4th card, we actually have another time a tie. We have the card Conscription from Pod of Problems, and it's a war card from Vespitole, obviously. It costs 9 gold, and it reads on play, draw a card, like all Vespitole cards do, and control a random enemy. Foil gains half gold value of the card. And it also has a flavor text, which is every blade, every man, everything at its price. Pretty good flavor text. And I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 1 point out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 7 points out of 15. And the reason why for these decisions is because for the design aspect, it doesn't really too much make sense that you are conscripting your enemies' allies, because usually the conscription is done in your country, and for example, conscripting something from your opponent is actually like conscripting allies from your enemies' states, and so really that doesn't really make too much sense. And other than the foil gains half gold value of card, this card is really just Seduce on Vespitole, which is not temporary control, but actually permanent. So that's too similar, but still probably an interesting card. And so for that reason I went for a midway rating of 3 out of 5. But for balance instead, I gave it 1 point out of 5, because really this card is too OP. Because Seduce, the best comparison for this card, is actually somewhat balanced, and it's not really that balanced in my opinion, because it's really strong and probably a bad card for the game health. But anyway, this card is much stronger than Seduce, because it's true that this card costs more, but actually you can draw a card with it, so it actually costs only 8, so that's not too much of a difference from the Seduce. And also, the obvious reason is that the control is permanent, and other than that, it's not a one-time effect, but you can actually redraw this card in particular. And it's true that probably Pod of Problems try to balance it out by giving your opponents an advantage. It's the half gold cost value card that you give to your opponent to balance these things out. But really, that does not balance the card at all. Even if you gave all the gold value of the ally that you control to the enemy, that still is too strong. Because the one time that you play this card first, that's true, that's probably too slow of a play, but really you can redraw this, and every time you redraw this, you steal something from your opponent permanently. And it's like you're stealing from your opponent's bank, so actually your opponent can't play ally at all. And so if your opponent somewhat plays an ally deck, he's screwed, pretty much. And really, that's too strong of a card, even by not buying it at all. Actually, your opponent knows that he can't go for a big ally, because you will steal it with Conscription. For example, think about a Zalazir deck with Zamjigar. He knows that he can't go for the Zamjigar and pull it to 4 health, because if he does that, you can steal him and you can never get it back. And you just spent a lot of health on it, and that's it. Yes, you get 2 gold back, but really, you think that 2 gold can balance this thing out? Not really. And Seduce, in that way, it's a bit balanced, because it's temporary. So you can actually, sometime later, redraw the Zamjigar, by killing it. There is some interaction. Instead, with Conscription, really, you can do that, and that's... And then, for the other 4th placed card, we have Cultist from Paladin. It's a slave card from Daramek, obviously. It costs 6 gold, and it reads on turn, sacrifice weakest and gain 1 magic, and it has 1 health points, since it's an ally. So I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design, and 1 point out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 7 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices, for the design aspect, is because really I think that it is a cool way to give a guaranteed magic to Daramek, but that's a bit counterintuitive for the flavor of Daramek, which really doesn't have a guaranteed way to produce resources. If you see at all the heirs, at all the stuff, there's only a random resource gain. And so that's a bit counterintuitive for Daramek in particular, because it does not have access to a guaranteed resource gain. But I think that this is probably fine still, because it has somewhat a synergy with magic in particular, and so there could be some cards that gives magic. Also, it is done in a correct way by sacrificing stuff, so that's a very Daramek thing, and so I think that that's still fine. But another, as I can say, another thing that this card missed out is that the fact that all the slaves, excluded the shepherd and the lepers, have a non-play effect, and this card could really have a non-play effect too, because that's also the problem for balance, so I'm just going to that also. This card in balance I gave it 1 point out of 5 because it's too slow, it's too expensive, and really you play it and your opponent actually probably can kill it. And if it does not, probably this will be the weakest ally into play, and so it will actually sacrifice itself, and that's just it. You gained 1 magic and that's it. So really, if it had a non-play effect, probably that will be a bit more interesting and more viable, as it will be not that slow as it is. Also, a way to solve this is by decreasing its cost also, but other than that, a pretty normal card. And then, for our third place, we actually have 3 entries tied up at this place, but I really can't say that this is a tie at all, and you will get why later. But anyway, the first third place card is a Field Medic from Rat Elemental, and it's a war card from Vespitule. It costs 7 gold, and it reads: on play, draw a card, on turn, fully heal must hurt, and it has 12 points. So I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design and 2 points out of 5 in balance for a final rating of 8 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is because, talking about design, I think it's an interesting mechanic to actually fully heal must hurt. That's really an interesting mechanic, but other than that, really is not too much interesting. It's just a plain Vespitule card. It draws a card and heals a staff, and that's it. Since this card actually isn't flawed in design, but isn't that interesting either, I opted for a midway value, and so 3 out of 5. Then for the balance, instead, I think that this card is a bit too weak, because it's a bit too expensive. For 7 gold, really you are not gaining that much value. Obviously, the best synergy here is pairing them with the Knights, or probably the Worship also. With the Knights it's probably better, because actually you have to hit 4 attacks, or you can't kill, actually 3. Yes, 4, I was right. Other than that, you can't kill him, and actually he will be report another time at full health. So really that's pretty interesting, but really another time this card is probably too expensive. Probably 6 will be fine, but even better at 5. I think this card is a bit interesting, balanced at 5 gold, but probably even 4 wouldn't be too much. So really 7, it's probably too much, that's for sure. I don't know what is the correct value, but 7 is too high, and for that reason this card is too weak and slow, and so that's why I gave it 2 points in design. So, for the second third place card, we have Warrior from Rat Elemental another time, and you see where this probably is going. But anyway, this is another card from the Slave tab from Daramek. It another time costs 7 gold, and it reads: on turn, play ally reduced to 0 life. So on turn, or play or ally reduced to 0 life, attack, and retaliates, and it has 12 points. So I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design, and 2 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 8 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices in design really is because this card is pretty simple, but yet interesting. And it has that little twist of the ally reduced to 0 life attack. Other than that, is pretty much an orphan gang, but it also has the retaliates, which is a leper thing. So really this card is like an orphan gang and a leper combined, with a little twist of the ally reduced to 0 life. So as I said, pretty simple, but still interesting, and for that reason I went for a pretty plain 3 out of 5 design. But for balance instead, I gave it these 2 points out of 5, because probably it's another time a bit too expensive. I do like the fact that it's a pretty good eater that you are not really wanting to remove. So it's actually like a 1 attack per turn permanently. You can actually remove it, obviously, but really you don't want to, because attacking it and killing it will take 2 of your resources, and it will attack 3 times, because it retaliates 2 times, but then this is also reduced to 0 life, and it attacks another time. So by killing it, you are just getting 3 attacks, which equals to 3 turns of him attacking, and probably in 3 turns it will come back into play anyway, and also on play it will attack, so it's actually like 4 turns that you need to wait until he redraws the warrior. And also I like the fact that they can stack. If you have 2 of them, the first one killed will attack for 4, then because the other one also will proc, and then the other one will attack for 3, so it's actually additive. Every other warrior that you have will attack for 1 more every time you kill one of them. So really I like this mechanic. But really, to do that, you have to really spend a lot of gold, and so that's the problem here. In my opinion, this is a cool card, but it costs too much. At another time, probably at 6 would be better, but even at 5, another time it will be still nice, and probably balance that 5 gold. And so that's the reason why for those ratings. And then, for the third placed card, we have Plagiarize, another time from Rat Elemental. So really, that's why I told that it wasn't really a tie, because it's only one person in this position. So Rat is pretty consistent, that is for sure. But anyway, this is Plagiarize from the Espionage tab for Madris, and it costs 6 gold, and it reads for 2 turns, restock from Foe. And it actually misses a line, which is destroy after use, but anyway, that's the main mechanic for Madris, so that was obvious that it was here. So anyway, I gave this card 3 points out of 5 in design, and 2 points out of 5 in balance another time, so really consistent that he gets all the cards with the same values, for a final rating of 8 out of 15, obviously. And so the reason why for those choices is because for design, it's because it's really a pretty interesting mechanic. It actually lacks a lot in Madris to restock cards. We actually have something similar to restocking cards with Stolen Plants. And this card is also a combination, we could say, of Synod and Stolen Plants, as it has the restock every turn for several turns from the Synod, and restock from Foe, which is from the Stolen Plannings. So really another time I didn't give this card too much points in design, because it's pretty similar to other 2 cards, but with its own twist, so that's fine. It actually combines those 2 rather strange effects together, so that's fine, and it's also a pretty flavorful mechanic for Madris anyway, so I didn't detract too many points out of design. And instead for balance, I gave this card 2 points out of 5, because another time is pretty much too weak and slow, because really you are getting 2 restocks, but one of these restock is actually, as I can say, it's not a true restock, because you're actually playing this card from your bank, and so that's one restock that you are missing, and then you restock 2 other cards. So actually, the first restock was the card that was not the Plagiarize. You could think of it like this. So you restock the Plagiarize, you could not have restocked the Plagiarize and restock another card. Instead, you played the Plagiarize to restock another card, which is the Plagiarize itself. So really, the first restock is not, it's like a free restock. You are not getting another restock. It's just the Plagiarize that it changes with itself. It changes itself with another card. And then the second turn, you're actually getting one more restock. So that's actually like paying 6 gold to get 1 more restock. And 6 gold for 1 restock, I know that it's pretty overpowered to restock in Madris, but really 6 gold for 1 restock is a bit too much, poor Madris guys. And so for that reason it's too slow at 6 gold, and then it's a bit too weak, and so therefore the low balance points. Then, the second place, we have War Horns from Tesla's Monster. It's a war card from Vespitole. It costs 8 golds, and it reads, on play, draw a card. For each ally, attack. And it also has a flavor text, which is, the earth trembles when House Vespitole goes to war. So, pretty evocating flavor text. But anyway, I gave this card 5 points out of 5 in design, and 3 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 13 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is for design in the first place, because it is true that this card is a stampede with the on play draw a card Vespitole thing in it, so it's actually too similar to a card we already have in play, in the game, sorry, but really I will close an eye on that, because really this feels like the card which is missing in the Vespitole War tab. And since it also, the Vespitole has the for each ally stuff, you gain, for each ally you gain a food, for each ally you gain a skull, for each ally you gain a gold, for each ally you attack. So that's really the missing card that we still need in Vespitole probably, so that's why this card is really on point, at least for design. Instead, for balance, I gave this card 3 points out of 5, because while this card is cool and all, it's a bit too weak compared to, for example, Benediction. With Benediction, you are actually pretty much attacking more than with War Horns, because the main card, the most simple card that you can synergize with Benediction are the militias, mercenaries, knights, and the soldier. So that's one attack per turn and per Benediction played, which is the same as the War Horns. Then the War Horns has a bit more synergy with cards that does not attack on turn. For example, the Wealthy Patron, or the cards that does not attack, any card that is not from the War tab. But in the other part, we have the Benediction, which makes much more attacks with the other war cards, like for example Ballista, Catapults, and Warships. So really, and if you play this card, you probably want to be aggressive, because this is the main point of this card, if you want to play it, to attack, obviously. And so you probably want to combine them, you want to be aggressive, and probably you want to combine it with aggressive allies, like for example the one that I said before, the catapults, sorry, and the warships and stuff. But if you run them, then you want to run the Benediction, and for just 1 more gold, really the Benediction has so much more value. So a possible way to balance this card out is probably to lower its cost, or some other things like that. Yeah, probably the cost is the only thing that can be changed in a card so well designed. And so that's it. That's why it's good, very good in design, but not that much in balance. And finally, for the first place, we have Duplicity from Pod of Problems, our time. It's a Madris card from the tab Espionage, and it costs 4 golds, and it reads, next card for a bias, destroy it. And also destroy after use, obviously, like all Madris cards. It also has a flavor text, which reads, selling people nothing is easier than you think. So really, another time, pretty evoking flavor text. I really like to read them, and if they are done well, they really do increase the design. But anyway, you don't want to do that for increasing your design, but really it's good to read well-made flavor text. But anyway, I gave this card 5 points out of 5 in design and 4 points out of 5 in balance, for a final rating of 14 out of 15. And the reason why for those choices is in design, because really this feels like really a very good Madris card. I could actually see this card printed into the game. It's actually probably the only missing effect which disrupts with your opponent economy and strategy stuff that misses on Madris. They can't actually destroy other stuff. They all destroy their own stuff, but they don't still destroy cards from your opponent, and that's a very good way to do that. Like for example, I can imagine a Madris opponent that wants to do something, but then when it actually buys it, it actually discover that it is false, and probably on that point, probably the name is a bit too iffy. Probably Falsify would have been better for this name and actually fits the card more. But anyway, I will not detract points for the name if it is not that much bad, so this is not too bad, so that's fine still. And then for balance, I gave it this card 4 points out of 5 and not the max, because I think that this card is probably not too strong, because it's actually pretty nice to have it, because your opponent can actually, you play mind games with your opponent. If he plays the duplicity, if he does not, what I can do, how can I lose the least amount if he plays the duplicity. But for that reason, this is a very interesting card in the gameplay aspect and so in balance also. But really, probably your opponent will always have dead cards in the bank, and so they don't care too much of getting them and them being destroyed, if obviously that card is not that expensive. And this is the key point. Probably your opponent will have non-expensive stuff in his bank, and probably cards that cost less than 4, which is the cost of duplicity. So, for example, if he has a 3 gold card, you play the duplicity, you spend 4 gold, then your opponent in response to that gets the 3 cost card, and so you're actually losing 1 gold compared to your opponent in playing the duplicity. But still, this is not too bad, because if actually you're playing against Vespitole, which has a lot of expensive stuff, for example, and only runs Loans, as is a very cheap card, yes, they can deny the duplicity by getting the loan, but then if they get the loan and get it destroyed, then they can probably go for the expensive stuff. Instead, if they want to not play the loan, but instead make they want to play the loan, and so they want to burn the expensive stuff, they have to pay more, and so duplicity gains much more value. So it's very disruptive, and as I say, it can make mind games played by you and your opponent, and so that's why I gave this card 4 points out of 5. So, that's it for this video. Be sure to hit the Discord server and leave your submission for the next week's CCC. Hope you liked it and find it useful. Be sure to leave down below a comment to let me know what you want to see in the next videos, and as always, see ya!